Welcome to Women in Power Active, an initiative started by You Are Sportswear to empower women to find their own active adventure. I'm your host, Jacalyn Gross. Today, we're pumped to welcome Erin Murray, a powerhouse in the world of strong women competitions. As a world's strongest woman title holder and record-breaking athlete, Erin has lifted, pressed, and carried her way to the top, proving that strength is just as much about tenacity as it is about muscle. From making history at the Arnold to coaching others in their own strength journeys, she's breaking barriers and raising the bar, literally. Don your war paint as we dig into her journey, grit, growth, and unstoppable power. Erin, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. Okay, so we always start at the beginning, which is basically, how did you begin your active journey?
So that goes way back. Do you want way back?
I want way back.
So I played sports growing up. My dad's a sports guy, so he put me in a lot of sports. I was always required to be in a sport if I didn't have another activity going on. So I tried most of them, hated them.
Yeah.
I was never good at them. It's not really what I liked. I was more like academically and musically inclined growing up.
Oh, cool.
So when I started college, I actually I was going to double major in math and French horn performance. So complete 180 from that. I also struggled a lot with my mental health growing up. That's something I kind of really started struggling with at like age 14, 15, and really came to a head my first year of college. And my second year, I ended up dropping out. On top of all that, developed a pretty significant eating disorder, had to leave school to get treatment. And I was really lucky. I went to like a treatment program where it was really not food focused. It was movement focused. Yeah. And so we did like every day we did like Tai Chi and martial arts and like things where we were pushed to encourage our bodies for what they could do. Yeah. And like that was the focus of the camp. And it really stuck. Yeah. I think partly because it was fun and empowering and partly because I was good at it. Like, you know, I will admit, like, my whole life I've been really competitive. I've had a really hard time with not being the best at things. And so it was a thing that I'm like, oh, like, I naturally move well. So I actually kept doing martial arts when I came home from that. Yeah. And it kind of snowballed from there. I wanted to be better at martial arts, so I started doing CrossFit because I was really not in shape. Like, and I knew that I needed to get stronger for martial arts, so I started doing CrossFit. Was really drawn to like the strength parts of it, like when we got to like deadlift and stuff like that. Like, that's really cool. So that kind of naturally pulled me into powerlifting. I met some people at the gym one day. They were like, "Hey, like your form on squats and deadlifts is actually pretty good. Have you ever thought about powerlifting?" And some guys that invited me to come start training with them, and like that's really what I fell in love with. Like, that process of feeling stronger and also like having to work towards something and seeing the results of that work paying off. So that's the point when I decided to go back to school. I went back to Central Washington University to study exercise science. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew that I really loved strength training. Yeah. And then when I was at school, I kind of happened to become friends with two guys that were like, I didn't know at the time, but two of the best like weight class strongman athletes in the world at the time. And I just kind of like fluked into being their friend. And they were putting on a contest as a fundraiser because they got invited to compete over in Norway and they were just trying to like raise money. And I'm like, oh, sure. I'll like jump in to help my friends. Yeah. And that was in 2015. That was my first strongman contest. And like, I was hooked. Like I loved powerlifting and strength training, but there was just something about strongman and like the well-rounded athleticism of the sport that I was just like this is cool. Like this is what I want to do. And I've been doing it ever since.
That's so cool. So you've like gone on to be like very successful. One of the things that I did want to ask you about is like, I know kind of going back to your weight struggles when you were younger, like how have you dealt with that in your head because you had to kind of go up in weight, obviously. Like how has that been for you? Like
it was hard at first. Yeah. And I think it wasn't really until I got more involved in strongman that I was able to like honestly let that go a little bit. I think I tricked myself into thinking that I was letting it go when I was powerlifting. Because I was eating more. Like when I started powerlifting, I remember I competed in the 132 class. Yeah. I'm like almost 200 pounds now, so that was a long time ago. Yeah. And so like I knew I needed to get bigger. But I also still really cared about how I looked, and I was still really kind of obsessive about that. So I remember I trained really hard in college, but like I also wouldn't go out for pizza with my friends. I wouldn't like go grab a beer. Like those weren't things that I did at first when I was powerlifting, because I still like, I wanted to be strong, but I wanted to maintain that image, and like I was kind of like battling that a little bit.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really until I fell in love with strongman and fell in love with my own potential within the sport, that I was able to kind of like step back from that. And it's not gone. I think that's the thing. The misconception with mental health is that people think it's something that you like get over or like you recover from, and it's like not present anymore. It's always going to be present. Like it's always part of my life. And there's times of the year, you know, depending on what's going on, that it's still there.
Yeah.
But I have something that I care about more now, you know, that I can recognize those feelings and recognize discomfort sometimes. And I have like people in my life and resources that you know, that help me with that, help me like manage it. But at the end of the day, I am very passionate about what I do. I'm passionate about, you know, my success in the sport. I'm passionate about the message I'm putting out to others. I'm passionate about, what I'm trying to encourage other people to do and prioritize. And all of that is more important than the discomfort of those feelings.
Right. Yeah, totally. Going along with that, like what kind of made you fall in love with strongman competitions?
It made me feel like an athlete, I think, is part of it, which is strange because I never really cared about being an athlete growing up. It was just, I never really liked sports, but it made me feel like an athlete. And I fell in love with the reward that came from working towards something. Because I'll admit, growing up, I didn't have to work that hard at the stuff I was good at. Like I was naturally gifted in school. Like academics came easy to me. I was always like really smart. I was good at music. Like most things that I tackled, I did not have to work toward them, but I didn't have to work that hard.
Yeah.
And so like success felt good. I felt good that people were proud of me, and it felt cool to be good at stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't think that sense of like empowerment comes unless you've worked hard for something. And like strongman is not, I moved well. But I was not a natural athlete. I was not like, I wasn't one of these people that like came out of nowhere and like won nationals their first year in the sport. Like, you know, I had to work hard for it over the course of years. And I think the sense of like fulfillment that you get when you succeed at something that you've been working at for years is so much bigger than something that just kind of came naturally.
Totally. And then okay, so a lot of listeners probably don't know what strongman competitions are like. And I was like, even when I was researching it, it sounded like sometimes they're different than other ones. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's a hard sport to explain.
Okay.
You know, like something like powerlifting is easy. It's squat, bench, deadlift every time.
Yeah.
It's black and white. Strongman is about kind of lifting odd objects. It kind of started as a spectacle. So you think like circus strongmen, like lifting, you know, giant stones and giant dumbbells and like pulling trucks. Kind of, I think strongman is rooted in the spectacle of it. And so the events are different every single time, and it's kind of meant to be cool to watch, like to do like feats of strength. And so, you know, powerlifting is about like how much weight can you lift. Strongman is a little bit more well-rounded. Sometimes it's how much weight can you lift. Sometimes it's how fast can you do this thing. How fast can you pick up this thing and move with it? How many times can you pick this up? And so it kind of challenges more aspects of strength than just that like top end, in a way that is like it's supposed to look cool. Like that's kind of like where it all started. And I think part of what like makes you feel like a badass when you're doing it.
Yeah, that's so cool. So like, okay, there's two things I want to ask you about this, but one was like, when you're doing this, like, how do they choose who gets into like these bigger competitions if you're doing so many different things?
So that's a big question.
Okay.
There's a lot of controversy in the sport right now, actually. So when I started, it was a very clear path. There were local shows that would qualify you for nationals. Nationals could qualify you for the Arnold, which was like the highest like international level amateur competition. And then if you won nationals or you won the Arnold, you would get your pro card. And then you can no longer do amateur shows, and then there's a different pro circuit. So like America's Strongest Woman is a pro show. At the time, the Arnold the Arnold Pro Show was something that your pro card could get you into. It's a little bit more complicated now, and I think not necessarily. It's not a bad thing. We're just figuring it out. The men's side of the sport has been a lot more developed for a long time. And that comes with its own complexity. But women are kind of, it's growing very fast for women, and I think they're trying to figure out how to handle it.
Yeah.
So now we have the Arnold Classic, which is usually 10 to 12 athletes that are invited. And then last year was the first year that they did the Rogue Invitational for women. It's 10 athletes for that. The Arnold, I think, it's only been 2-3 years that they've done that. So they're fairly new.
Yeah.
So as of right now, they're invitationals.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like the people putting on the shows invite who they think based on the success of other shows throughout the year.
Yeah.
There's other big shows that they look at, like World's Strongest Woman at the end of the year is something that anyone can try to qualify and sign up for. So that's a show that title matters because truly anyone can go fight for that title.
Yeah.
Some of the big exposure shows, the big production, the big money shows at this point are invitationals, and so it's a little bit there's a gray area. So it's a hard question right now, but it's something that it's good because the sport's trying to figure out how to handle this like exponential growth that we've seen on the women's side.
Yeah. Wow, that's really exciting. Yeah. And then going into like competitions, like I guess, I mean, what I've learned from listening to other podcasts about you is that you, and we kind of alluded to it in the beginning, was like donning war paint. Can you explain like why that is something that you've chosen to do and like where it came from?
Yeah. So at this point, it's something I do for fun. But when I started it years ago, it came from a place of anxiety. Like my entire life, I had horrible stage fright.
Yeah.
I remember like, so I was a musician growing up, but like recitals, I got to the point where like I had to take beta blockers to do recitals and stuff because I would get so like physically anxious that I couldn't perform.
Yeah.
And that affected me a lot in my earlier years when I was still really anxious and lacking confidence. And especially like on the first event, I was noticing I always underperformed because I just couldn't get my body to respond the way that I needed it to.
Yeah.
And so I kind of blended two kind of loves of mine. It was my coach at the time that suggested I started doing my makeup because I had gotten really involved in like doing makeup. It was my creative outlet kind of during quarantine time for me to like have something, to hold on to. And I got really kind of good and had fun doing special effects makeup. And it was like, what if we like blended those? And it was a way for me to start my day doing something that was calming for me, like something that I could just kind of, it was a grounding technique, I guess, kind of, like spend an hour like just focusing on that and not focusing on the day that I had ahead was part of it. And then part of it was like, it was permission for me to like become someone else and like recognize that like Erin can be anxious and scared and nervous and all these things, and like, that's okay. Because when we put this on, we're not her anymore. Like this isn't Erin going out into the field. Like this is a different persona, and it was like a way for me to create someone else. And I posted about that one at one point, and someone commented on it that they used the term controlled dissociation, and I kind of love that. Like that's kind of what it is. Like in a controlled way, like I'm dissociating from my the anxious self that's not really equipped to handle the job, and becoming someone who is.
Yeah. And then now when you're kind of from that, like what I wanted to talk a little about goals that you had for yourself, because you have done a lot. What are your goals like going forward? Like what do you have in your sights right now?
That's awesome. It's a big question actually. So I'll go back. When I first started, I didn't really know. When I first started, I think I'm actually fortunate because when I first got into the sport, it was still fairly new for women. There wasn't like, I knew there was like the local show nationals, Arnold's circuit. That was my only goal, was to make it through that circuit. As there started to be more opportunities for women, it started to grow as a sport, and I started to realize that I was getting really good at it. I kind of had these goals of like, I'm not really good at like casual hobbies. Like I really want to be the best at things, and I was like, I'm gonna try to be the best at this. And I didn't really know what that looked like at the time because there wasn't like a clear like, if you accomplish X, Y, and Z, you will be considered the best. Like that's not really how the sport works.
Right.
But I had a bucket list, of things I wanted to accomplish. One of those was, I think, a world title is kind of the biggest thing that you can win. But for me, I was like, multiple people have world titles. Like it's a huge accomplishment, and that's not to like discredit anyone who has one, because like everyone that's made it to that point is phenomenal. But like that wasn't good enough for me. So I was like, what can I do that's more than that? And while there are other people that hold world titles, there had been no one that won them in multiple weight classes. And that was a thing that I was like, okay, that was my first like big bucket list check, because no one can take that away. Like I am the first person who has ever done that. And so now at this point, if someone else does it, like that's awesome. But I can always say I was the first person to like break that barrier.
Yeah.
And so at that time it was about, breaking barriers and what like firsts can I accomplish. And I'm still passionate about that. I'm still like, absolutely, like I want to be on the Mount Rushmore of strongman. Like I want to, like 20 years from now when people look back and say like, who was the greatest in their sport? I want to be in contention in that conversation. You know, that's something that's important to me. I'm also at a point that I want to make a career out of this.
Yes.
And it's hard because sometimes I feel like the decisions that follow the path of becoming the best athlete and the decisions that follow the path of making a career as an athlete, you would expect them to line up, but they don't always. And so I'm at a tricky point now where that's a hard question to answer because I want both equally, and I'm trying to balance how to have both.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And okay, so kind of turning from that, you are also coaching as well. Like that's another part of what you're doing. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, are you coaching mainly strong men, competitors, or like who are you coaching?
Kind of a spectrum. I'd say I coach a little bit in person and also online.
Okay.
By nature, most of the people that reach out to me online, and they reach out because they want to do strongman.
Yeah.
Like that's what I do. If someone's going to seek me out, it's usually for that.
Yeah.
I have a spectrum of competition levels. I have people that are like really like trying to get their pro cards, and I have people that are like just getting into the sport. I have clients that just want to be healthier and just want to strength train, and I think strongman is a fun way to do that, and maybe don't necessarily want to compete, but it's a fun way to achieve different goals. I also like training people that don't want to do strongman at all. And I think that's a misconception that people reach out and they think, well, if I don't want to do strongman, like, are you the right coach for me? And like, just because I do it doesn't mean that I'm gonna make you do it. I'm gonna suggest that you try it because you might have fun. But most of my in-person clients, I do house calls for people that can't make it into the gym. Like I have a couple who just had a newborn, so they can't really get anywhere. And I have one of my clients is an older man with Parkinson's, and he can't leave his house. And like I love those clients just as much because I'm, their goals are just as important, and helping them improve their quality of life, even if it's not to pick up a giant rock, but it's just to like help my client be able to get down the stairs easier. Like, that's just as important.
Yeah, I actually had we put out questions for Erin on Instagram, and so we had a couple of questions come in about like some specific coaching questions. And then one of them was like, what if you don't have like that much time to train? Like what would be the like biggest bang for your buck? Like what would you suggest for somebody who
like for coaching?
Just for if somebody didn't have like time to train, like what's one thing that as a coach you might suggest that they try to get in if they couldn't do anything else?
It's hard because it really depends on your goals. It depends on your goals, what your weaknesses are. I think everyone can benefit from strength training in some way. So if you can't get in, and a set of bands at home is something that's super cheap. You can get it off Amazon, and you can do a lot with that. I think people think cardio is easy. You can go out for a run or something. I think there's a huge undervalue in how important strength training is, even if you're not trying to like necessarily like hit a max deadlift or like compete in strength training. Like I see older patients, or not patients, I shouldn't use that word, older clients of mine, that if you haven't strength trained, that really affects you later in life in a way that it makes you less resilient. And even if your goal isn't to lift huge amounts of weights, your goal should be to stay resilient as long as possible. And so prioritizing that, I think, is way more important than the cardio that's easier for people to do. Yes,
that's a good point. If you don't mind, I might ask you a couple other of the questions.
Yeah.
And then
if you never watched Strongman, I would check it out. It's cool because there's every contest is different, but there's usually some sort of like overhead press, some sort of deadlift, picking up rocks, pulling trucks. It's like that kind of stuff. So if you haven't checked out some contests, I would check that out.
Yeah. Good advice. How do you prevent injury?
It's tough. It's hard for me to answer because the reality is I'm a competitive athlete.
Yes.
So the way I train is not how I encourage other people to train.
Yeah.
So I think people get like intimidated because they'll see how I train, they'll see things that I deal with, and they don't want that, and that's okay. I do this competitively and as a profession. For me, injuries are going to happen.
Yes.
Not because I want to be healthy, but I don't train as hard as I do for general health.
Yeah.
I train as hard as I do because I want to win competitions, and that looks different than a client of mine who just wants to be stronger. So the injury conversation is tough. If you're training smart and you're training for health and you're training with a coach, hopefully, who is teaching how to do things correctly, injuries should be minimal.
Yeah.
Injuries happen, more in competition. And I see more injuries happen with clients in their day-to-day life than in the gym. And that can be mentally challenging.
Yeah.
And I think people get in a headspace of feeling like I'm injured so I can't do anything. And that's like the furthest from the truth. Like you can A, work around it, and B, just leaving it alone. I think sometimes is the worst thing to do. Just being stagnant and not rehabbing that and not strengthening is the biggest mistake you can make, because that just leads to more injuries down the road. So the best thing I would say, like, stay active and find someone that can help you do it smart.
Yeah, that's great. I did want to ask you one that was put in through or a deep question. This is another athlete asked us, who is actually in the UFC, or was in the UFC. As another athlete, I'd like to know if you struggle or have struggled with tying your self-worth to your success in your sport, and if you have, how have you managed those struggles?
I think I would say probably most competitive athletes struggle with that. I would say probably up until the last year and a half, it was really prevalent in my life. Mental health is a roller coaster. It's gone up and down over the years, but I would say I don't think I've really gotten to a place where I can confidently say, like, I'm in a good spot. Yeah. Until maybe the last year or two, maybe, because I did put way too much value into the sport and what I was doing, and my sense of self-worth and confidence and everything would be shook if I couldn't perform. Yes. And a big part of, there's been a lot of working through that. First, I would say get a therapist. I think everyone should be going to therapy. Some sort of therapist or sports psychologist. I think that's important for everyone. A big thing for me was just having fun. I lost the fun in what I was doing, and it became all about doing the right things to succeed and not the things that I enjoy. And I don't think it's a bad thing. Like, I wouldn't say like my entire identity is strongman, but my entire identity was competing for a little bit. And I've started to just have more fun with movement. I just got out for some hikes last year, which I would never have done, because I'm like, oh, it's going to ruin my training for later. But like, just having fun in the gym. Like, I don't know if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see, like, last year we did a lot of like silly gym challenge videos and like shenanigans and stuff where we took some of the serious out of it, and like, you can still work hard. But for me, a big part of letting go of that, like tying my self-worth to how I was performing, was allowing myself to have fun with the process. Because I think a lot of us lose that at some point. That's very true. And then, what are the ways you remain consistent with your routines? Consistency has always been my biggest challenge. It's from the same person. Ooh, that's a big one too. The answer I usually give, it's not always super helpful because it doesn't help with your headspace at all. It's hard because you use the words consistency in routine. I think a lot of times I get asked, like, how do you stay motivated? And the answer is I don't. But it's just my day. Like, I don't pay my bills because I enjoy paying bills. I pay my bills because it's a thing that I have to do to live the life that I want, because if I don't, I'm not going to have a roof over my head. And so some of it is just making that decision. I watched a podcast with I should remember who it was. It was Simon Sinek, and I think it was Mel Robbins, where they were talking about that a little bit, and they were talking about the Nike slogan. I don't know if you've seen that one. They were talking about the one of the most famous slogans in the world is "Just Do It," and she asked, like, what the important word of that is, and he said that was the do, and she said, no, the important word there is the just. That sometimes you don't have to want to, but you accept that and just do it anyways. I think that's a little bit a part of it. I've also been doing a lot of thinking actually recently about training terms that we use are minimum effective dose and maximum recoverable volume. So it's exactly how it sounds. Your minimum effective dose is the least amount of work that you can do to still make some forward progress towards your goals. Maximum recoverable volume is the most amount of work that you can do and still recover from. I've actually been thinking about that a lot in terms of like my own life, because I was dealing with that a lot in my Arnold prep, like trying to find that, because it gets to a point sometimes where your maximum recoverable volume is lower than your minimum effective dose, and that's where you get into a tricky spot where like you can't make progress. And thinking about that in terms of life, that like there's times of life that you have a lot of resources and energy and like you feel great and you can do everything, and then there's times that you can't. And I think there's times that it's okay to say, okay, what is my minimum effective dose? Like, what things do I need to do to reach my goals? And that's like athletic goals, but that's also like life goals. Like having a roof over my head is a life goal. So like, what's the minimum things that I need to do to keep that? And I think it's okay sometimes to step back and say, like, we don't always have to be up here, but we want to stay somewhere in this spectrum, and that there's going to be times that we can't do as much, and just identifying what are those bare minimums, and giving yourself some grace that if you're doing the bare minimums, you're still moving forward, and that's okay.
Right. Can you talk about how you stay motivated even when the outcome of competition or trying to meet a particular goal doesn't turn out the way you want, or is exceptionally challenging?
I think it goes a little bit back to the fun element. I think that if you asked me that 3 or 4 years ago, not being successful really ruined me. And I think getting to a point where I'm enjoying the process again. Like, I'm not going to pretend like it's not disappointing. Like, if you work really hard for something and you don't get the result you want, like, that sucks. And it's really disappointing. And there usually is a grief period after that. But I think, it's okay to grieve that. I don't think that that's bad. I don't think we have to pretend like we didn't care that much, because we do. But finding the fun in the process has been really important for me. Otherwise, there's been times that I might have just quit. But if you enjoy the process, then, that holds you there. And I think community. It's cool now. Like, obviously, I want to win, but, I've developed a community with a lot of these girls. And as much as I want to win, like, these are my friends. And these are my friends, and I want them to do well. And I want the sport as a whole to do well. And so as I can be upset for myself. And also happy for the people in the sport that I care about.
So. How is the community in the sport? Like,
it's mostly really good. And I think it's hard. Nothing is ever black and white. Like, there's challenges. I think we're people. Like, there's always challenges. But in general, I think the strength community is really positive, really empowering. We want success for each other. We also are all some of the most competitive people you'll ever meet, and so we all want to win. But at the end of the day, like usually after contests, everyone goes out, and gets dinner together, and we'll go out and celebrate. And like, even at the high level, and even at like lower level, like, I love my gym because we have such high level athletes, and then we have people in there that have never lifted before, and like their successes are just as exciting. And I think that the strength community, because we all started somewhere, we all know what it takes, we all know how hard this process is, and it's such a supportive community of people that like want to see others succeed.
So nobody's like chucking your stuff or anything? Okay.
there's always lemons in every community, but like I would say for the like, I can't think of anyone that I wouldn't want to go grab a beer with after a show. So.
Do people like meet you when you're in competitions and then like talk to you afterwards and be like, okay, you're not how I thought you were going to be just because of the war paint?
It's actually kind of weird. Like, I think I'm very not myself at contests. And I think that's okay. I try. Because of that, I also try really hard not to judge other people for how they are in contests, because we all handle that environment differently. And everyone handles stress differently. Everyone, has a competitive flip that they switch. And so I've just learned that it's not fair to judge people in that environment. Because I think for the longest time, people kind of thought that I was a bitch. Because, like, I don't talk to people at shows. Like, some people are nervous chatters. Especially earlier on when I got really, really nervous, I kind of had to, like, ground myself and, like, be with myself. And I didn't really talk to anyone. And so for me, like, the war paint, at first part of it was, like, gave me permission to do that. Like, I didn't, like, if I was myself, I would feel like, am I being rude or, like, standoffish? And it gave me permission to be like, I'm not me. And I'll be me later and we can be friends. So it is weird. Like sometimes on the floor, like, everyone is a different person, and then as soon as the contest is over, like, we're friends again. And I think that's okay too. Like, everyone handles competition differently.
And that's okay. Well, it is a competition. Somebody's got to win. So I I guess I'm going to ask you a question for myself because I sometimes struggle, especially like at the starting line with imposter syndrome. Just like even if I've like trained for it and I show up and I feel confident, like as soon as I get on that starting line, something's like, oh, I don't belong here. I shouldn't race this, even if it's like a small race. Like, yeah. How do you deal with that? Or do you have that as well?
I think I'm starting to let it go. I think for the longest time I was. I think that's really normal and natural that I felt a need to prove myself. And then I felt like if I didn't succeed in proving myself, I failed. And I actually probably have gotten that more with coaching than with being an athlete. There's some of me that being an athlete only affects myself. So like I get a little bit of that, but I've struggled a lot more with that in coaching over the years and feeling like, if I'm not the best coach in the world, am I doing people a disservice by coaching them? Like if there's someone better, would it be better for me to pass them off to someone who's better than me? And so I had this like need to like, if I can't be the best, I shouldn't do it at all. Which is stupid because if no one ever did anything unless they were literally the best in the world at it, there'd be like 50 people working in the world. That's and the best is different depending on what someone's looking for and what they need. And I might not be the best when it comes to like the science of programming, but I can be the best for someone in like relating to them in their life and what they need. And and I kind of had to reframe what best means and what being good at something means. And as being an athlete, like I've gotten to a point like I'm doing open shows now, and it's hard for me because there aren't shows that I'm going to win. Like I'm never going to be 6'4". Like I do pretty damn well for being a smaller athlete. But the reality is, people say that I'm being negative, and I'm not. It's just how I'm not going to beat girls that are 200 pounds more than me. Like, so I've had to let go of that and kind of look back, and I think that's actually helped me a lot. Because even though I might not be winning, like I'm still doing a lot more than 99.9% of the population. And so like, when you get on the start line, like you're still ahead of everyone who's not there. Like you're still ahead of everyone who doesn't have the drive or willpower to train for something. And I think like that change in perspective, like just because, and I don't know, like just, if you're going to win or you're going to participate or whatever it is, like you're still ahead of everyone that didn't try.
That's a good point. I need to let that go for sure.
At the end of the day, really, like, regardless of who it goes, whose life is that going to impact besides your own?
That's
and
true.
I think that's something I had to let go of. It's like, I see people, sometimes they'll post after a contest, like, I'm sorry to everyone who disappointed. And I'm like, I guarantee you there's not a single person who's disappointed. And that's, I think, hard for people to let go of and realize that, like, this really doesn't impact anyone's life besides my own. That's really good. And I know some athletes that could use hearing that too, because I've seen those posts. And like most people in your life that love you and care about you are proud of you for being there.
Exactly.
And if they're not, then they probably don't love you and care about you that much.
Exactly. They're not that big of a support system. I did want to, because you kind of brought up weight a little bit again. I wanted to ask you, because you've competed at 2 different weight classes. Which is also
3, actually.
3? Okay. First of all, like, explain the weight classes, because that's part of Strongman that we didn't cover. And then, like, what was like the motivation to compete at like a heavier weight class?
A few. So weight classes, currently it's broken up into 4 weight classes. So it's in pounds, it's a 140, 160, 180, and then open. So I've competed in 3. I think I shouldn't say this super confidently, but I'm pretty sure I'm the only athlete that competes internationally across 3 weight classes. So I just, last year, I've won 2 world titles in the 160 class. I've won 1 in the 180 class, and I compete open at shows like the Arnold. I got my invite there by winning the amateur Arnold. I think I'm also the only weight class athlete that's won the open amateur Arnold to get an invite to the big show. And that was just a cool thing for me. Like that kind of goes back to, it's like I want to do more than just like get the titles. I want to do things that have never been done before. So that was just a big goal of mine. And then the reality is, for good or bad, I mean, the sport is growing exponentially, which is awesome. The big shows are only for open women, like the Arnold and the Rogue Invitational, the big money shows, the big production shows are only open shows. And there's there's increasingly more opportunities for weight class athletes, but they're not shows that are like highly televised. They're not shows with huge prize money. They're not shows with, big production, like Rogue putting them on. I hope that it gets there. That would be really, really cool.
Yeah.
Because there's so many phenomenal athletes in the weight classes that just don't get the exposure because they're smaller. And that's sad and unfortunate that like someone who's just, is born into a smaller body may not have the opportunities as someone who lucks into being born into a body that's 6'4". And that's a bummer.
Yeah.
But, I want to prove that I can be there anyways.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So basically you went up in weight class so you could get into more competitive like shows.
Yeah. And so it was a hard turnaround. So in hindsight, it's probably stupid, but I wanted to, December of last year, I won a world title in the 73 kilo class. So that's 160 pounds. And then I turned around and did the Arnold Classic, which is an open show.
Yeah.
So I went from like 160 and then it was hard. It was a learning experience for me because that was the fastest turnaround I've done.
Yeah.
I've kind of jumped like one class at a time, but that was my first time trying to bump 2 weight classes.
Yeah.
It was really hard.
Yeah.
And it was really painful. I've never put on like that much weight so quickly.
Yeah.
I felt like shit.
Yeah.
And it was a learning experience. But like, there's, I think I did really well with the time that I had, but it was hard trying to go from like my smallest weight possible to like trying to become big enough to hang with these girls that are way bigger and stronger than me. And it was a great experience. And I think I'm very proud of myself for the work that I did. It was a really hard 12 weeks. It also wasn't healthy. And so it was kind of like a reflect back and learn like, okay, like how do we do this healthier? And so at this point I've just committed to staying in the open class for a little bit. I think that I've a little bit stunted my potential in the open shows because I've been dropping back down into weight classes periodically throughout the year. And so for the first time, I'm just going to commit to being bigger. And I think that's a mental challenge. I think a little bit, like we said, it never really goes away. A part of that holding onto the weight classes was a small part of me, like wanting to hold on to a certain aesthetic and like not wanting to like let myself go.
Yeah.
And I think I'm at a healthy place now and I have a really good team of people helping me. Then I'm like, okay, I need to just commit to being stronger and not worrying about anything else.
Yeah. So is it like something that you have to like make yourself eat more? Are you hungry?
It's tough. 'Cause, like, getting ready for the Arnold, like I kind of had to force feed and like, it's hard both ways. I think people kind of roll their eyes at me when I complain about it. Like, oh, dieting's so much harder. I would much rather diet.
Yeah.
Like, for me, like not eating when I'm hungry is so much easier than force feeding when I'm full. And it was like 12 weeks of being really uncomfortable most of the time.
Right.
And like for me, that's why it's important to have a nutrition coach that I trust and I know is not going to have me do things that aren't in line with my goals. And so, we've changed a little bit now and we're pulling back a little bit and kind of focusing on health and having someone on my team who knows what they're doing and can take that mental load off my plate.
Right.
I just have to do what I'm told.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's good to have that person that you trust, really, because then you don't have to worry about it. So somebody was like saying they know how you empower women, but how do you think that you empower women?
That one's a weird one for me.
Yeah.
I want to be an example of not just strength, but like authenticity. I think especially in like the world of social media, a lot of people just show the highlights. And I really just want to be real with people, and so I try really hard for that. I don't think it'll ever stop being weird to me that like the reach that I have, and like when I go to shows and like have fans, like that feels so weird because like I'm just a person, and so I think there's a little bit of me that's like disconnected from that. Like I don't know if I'll ever get used to it. But I do want to be someone who shows that like you can kind of do anything. Yeah.
That's really interesting experience to go from like just being an athlete and then all of a sudden you have fans and you're like, how do you know me? I didn't. And then the other one was, what accomplishment are you most proud of?
Ooh. That's a hard one.
Yeah.
It's tough because, I think of like athletic accomplishments. Honestly, I would say stuff like this.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I get a lot of comments like, oh, you're natural on camera. Like, oh, I wish I could, you know, fill in the blank. I sucked at this years ago. I remember after my first world title, their videographer, their film guy came to my gym to film with me. And I remember him like putting me in front of a camera and like trying to get me to talk. And I could not put a sentence together.
Yeah.
It was horrible. And I don't think he got any usable footage from that. And that's kind of the moment that I realized like, oh, like if I like being an athlete itself is, you know, easy. It's not easy, but it's clear cut. But I'm like, if I want to like make a living as an athlete, like these are the things I need to get better at.
Yeah.
And so I started like making myself talk to my camera just at home, you know, and I wouldn't post it anywhere, but like I need to get used to talking on camera, and I made myself start doing podcasts, and I made myself start doing more like Instagram content and like taking courses on how social media works and like that kind of behind the scenes stuff people don't see, and they just see like the end result and be like, oh, I wish I was good at that, and I'm like, you could be. And I think that's, you know, the athlete stuff, like I can list accomplishments that I'm really proud of, but I think it's stuff like this because, you know, 5 years ago I could never talk on a podcast like this, and that's something that I worked really hard for.
It seems like you work really hard for everything that you
I don't like being bad at things. I think, especially something like that where it's like highlighted like in my face, like you suck at this. I'm like, okay, well, I'm never gonna suck at this again.
Is there somebody like specifically that like inspires you that like you look up to?
You know, I get that question a lot, and I don't know. It's hard because I can think of role models in my life of like someone who's done a thing that I want to be good at. So like someone that like pops into my head is Dana Lynn Bailey. Actually, she's someone that I followed for a long time, and someone who I think took her success and ran with it and really like created something for herself. And I think there's people like that where I can take aspects of what they've done and be like, how do they do that and how do I emulate that? But it's also kind of weird, I think, especially as I've gotten bigger in the sport and like met celebrities and like we're all just people, and so like there's people that, you know, I think I can learn from, but I don't really feel like I like idolize or look up to anyone because I'm kind of at a point where like we're all human, and I wish that we were all kind of just on a level playing field, and I think that's kind of the same when people like get nervous about meeting me, and I wish they weren't, because I'm like we're both just people, and like we can just chat as people. And so that's a hard question to ask because I kind of I view all of us kind of on the same level.
I did get a little nervous meeting her. I messed up the intro like 3 times. So. But yeah, no, that's really interesting. Also, you like, there's so many things that you have for your like goals for yourself that like are things that other people haven't done yet. Like, it's almost like the same thing with me. Like, oh, I would love to do like an FKT because nobody's done like the fastest known time of something. But similarly, you want to do, your goals are like to do things that nobody has done before. Is there any like random weird thing like you want to like pull a truck like a mile or something like that? Like, do you have any like weird random goals for yourself?
Well, I had one, and then someone else did it. I wanted to be the first woman to carry the Hoosville Stone, which is it's a famous rock. We're weird. We have famous rocks. It had been picked up, and no one had ever carried it. And actually, like Sandra Bradley did. I think it was last year. So I was kind of like, damn, someone got to it first. Like that was the last like, you know, milestone goal that I had for myself. I gotta think of something else. So she's awesome for that. It was a really cool feat. It's like 410 pounds.
Wow.
It had been picked up, but I think she was the first one to like carry it at all. It was pretty cool.
That's and
like, she got to it first.
You're like, I'll give it to you. That's pretty cool. So nothing else that you're like looking forward to that you like?
Currently, no. I think I'm a big one. It's not like a feat of strength or something like that, but you know, the biggest goal of mine right now is to make it to the Rogue Invitational. Like, that's the kind of the next milestone. It's a huge show. The last year was the first year that they had women at all.
Wow.
I was the alternate last year, so I was kind of like, I was like there, and I got to experience it, and like actually like being there, I was like, I need to be here. So that's my biggest goal for myself right now.
No, that's very cool. One of the questions I didn't get to before, but I wanted to ask about was how do you like breathe through a heavy lift? Because like,
you hold your breath.
Okay.
No, I mean, there's that's part of training. There's like you know, breath work training and stuff that we do, but like heavy lifts, you don't breathe.
You don't breathe though. Okay. Everybody seems to know that for me. because I was just thinking about like climbing, like you have to like kind of breathe through each movement, which have you ever tried climbing before?
Like rock climbing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've gone a couple times.
Okay.
It's really hard.
Yeah. I would love to climb with you.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
I actually love climbing in like off season because one of my weaknesses is like my grip strength, and so I feel like it helps with that.
It definitely would help you with that. Yeah.
But I mean, strongman, it's like because we have like a heavy lift, you don't really breathe. But like we have events that are like for reps. That, like, you do have to breathe.
Yeah.
And it's just something you train. I mean, there's like exercises that you do for that to strengthen your breathing muscles, and people don't really think about like intentionally training that, but you kind of have to.
Yes, exactly. And then how much, because you are doing, I guess you would do kind of a little bit of cardio or need cardio. What's your cardio training?
Actually, more than, I think everyone's surprised when I'm like, everyone thinks I'm out of shape. And I've actually been doing some CrossFit workouts. After the Arnold, I kind of took some time off like training because my body just needed to recover and I did some CrossFit. Yeah. I feel like people kept like, oh my God, like you actually did pretty good at that. And like I have a new coach now that like my first conditioning day, I did it pretty easily. She's like, oh, I'm actually impressed. And people are always surprised that like I'm in shape.
Yeah.
I think people think of like strength athletes like powerlifters, like we're only doing one rep and like you don't really have to, but there's a lot of like really heavy conditioning aspects of strongman, so you need those like short bursts, but also just generally like some of my training sessions go like 5 hours, and like I can't make it through a 5-hour workout if I'm not generally conditioned, and so like I actually do more like high intensity like interval type stuff, and then there's like I think the one that I did, the first one that my coach had me do that she was surprised by, it was 4-minute intervals on the bike. So it was like a 4-minute interval, 2-minute rest, like 4 rounds of that. So that's more like moderate duration. Yeah. And then I do like, zone 2 steady state, and then just heart health stuff. You know, it's important to kind of do everything along the spectrum. And I think that's a big miss with a lot of strength athletes. I know a lot of strongman athletes that don't necessarily do that. And I think it's a huge disservice. Yeah. I think staying generally healthy and well conditioned, it's just good for sport and good for life. Yeah.
How long are normal competitions? Like,
it depends. So I've done competitions that are run super fast back to back in a span of 3 hours, and then there's some some that go 3 days. Okay. It really depends. Most shows are 5 or 6 events. 5 to 7 events, and sometimes they're condensed into a short period of time, and sometimes they're spaced out over the course of days where you only do like 2 a day.
Oh wow. Okay. Mentally, that would be really hard, I think.
Yeah, it's a different challenge. I like both. I personally, because I think I'm one of the more conditioned athletes, I like when it's like really fast, because I think that kind of weeds out people who don't prioritize that like cardio and conditioning aspect. And then those long days are just mentally challenging. Like there's some like a 3-day show where you're doing an event and then doing your next event 5 hours later. You have to kind of figure out how to handle that like the emotional up and down, like getting hyped and then coming back down and then getting like rehyped. That's tricky in a different way. Yeah.
Kind of going a little bit along with that, but like you have a recent like sponsor for smelling salts. What does smelling salts do for you, like before you work out?
I think there's some misconceptions now because it's become kind of a novelty item that people just want to make the strongest smelling salt. It's supposed to kind of trigger your fight or flight response a little bit, and open up your airways. Oh wow. And so the first time we do it, it can be a little bit jolting. Some of them take it too far to the point where it's like just painful, and that's not really helpful. But the goal is to trigger like a nervous system response. Okay. For a lot of people, it helps them get out of your head. So if you're feeling like anxious about something, it kind of like snaps you out of it and can help clear your head. And then ones that are done well and done right will help kind of open up your nasal passageways too. Okay.
So like as somebody who's like struggled with anxiety, like it kind of flips it then. It's like if you are feeling anxious, it kind of takes it away. Yeah. Okay.
And I kind of got roped into this like series of reviewing smelling salts recently that I didn't expect to take off, but it did. And so there's a lot of people in the comments discussing, and I've heard people say that like with panic attacks that like sometimes it can like snap them out of a panic attack. I'll admit I've used them while driving sometimes if I'm falling asleep and I need to like wake up. So they're originally ammonia is used to like revive people that have passed out. But they've kind of reformulated it for athletic purposes.
Oh, okay. I want to just try one just to see.
Right now?
I know.
You want to try it? You want to try one right now on camera?
Do you have some?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I think I've got one in my bag. Might as well.
I'm pretty sure I don't know.
see.
2.
Okay.
Stay strapped.
Okay. Okay, so just smell it.
So I wouldn't get too close if it's your first time ever doing them. I'd probably like
keep it
4 or 6 inches away from your face and just give it a smell.
Okay. Okay.
Get a little closer.
Okay. Ooh, yeah. That's like kind of goes into your nose and it feels like Bengay or something like that.
That's like a little tingly.
Yeah.
And that one's got like a little minty in it, so it's supposed to be a little bit tingly too.
Yeah.
And so people like for lifting, they'll get like close to it and it kind of like punches you in the face a little bit.
Is this is your brand?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Zone Smell and Salt.
Zone Smell and Salt. Okay.
The grape bubblegum one.
Ooh.
My favorite.
Yeah. Oh, that definitely. I need to do that before my podcast starts. And then
we'll wake you up.
Yeah. So we always like to ask this question at the end of our episodes. It's, what words of empowerment would you give women, who might be like trying something new, staying consistent, maybe trying Strongwoman? Yeah. You know,
I think it's fun. You're wearing my shirt with the slogan that I've been going by for years now. Yeah. I started using disrespect the impossible.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a war paint. That's kind of the slogan that I've given, and I think it applies to myself as I've been trying to like break barriers in the sport. But I think it applies to everything. I think a lot of times, unfortunately, especially women, I think are kind of tricked into thinking that you can't do things sometimes, and it doesn't have to be something like winning a world title. It can be like anything at work or in life that just because someone doesn't believe that you could do something or something hasn't been done before doesn't mean that it's impossible. And I think that disrespect the impossible and like you kind of fuck that word, like what does that mean? Like it doesn't really mean anything. Like, it doesn't have to mean anything unless you let it. And I think really most people are capable of so much more than they think. In general, there's it can be hard to believe in yourself. Yeah. And I think especially if, you don't have other people believing in you, that can be hard. But just, I never would have thought my life would be where it is now. If like 10 years ago, I could have like a snapshot of my life, I wouldn't believe it. Yeah. And I think that's really cool. I think that like you never really know where you can end up, and challenging yourself to not believe in barriers is really empowering.
Yes, I love that. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to say?
I don't think so.
No?
That was a good lineup of questions.
Okay, great. Yeah. Yeah, I'm super inspired right now. Is there, what plugs do you want to do? You want to Zone and how people can follow you?
So Zone is my only official sponsorship right now. I've got some things in the works that I can't talk about quite yet, but if you want to follow me over on Instagram, e.murray_pro.strongwoman. It's a long title. I don't know if you can tag that somewhere.
I'll put
That'll
it in
be the best place to get updates on everything going on in my life.
Great. That's wonderful. And if people want to like hire you as a coach, they could message you there?
Contact me there. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Yep. You can follow me personally. That's at Jacalyn Gross, JACALYNGROSS. You can follow Your Sportswear. That's the letter U, the letter R, Sportswear on all social platforms. You can check out any of our products at yoursportswear.com. If you're listening to this and you want to watch the video version, you can go to UR Sportswear's YouTube channel and subscribe. Both the audio and video version of this podcast was produced by Canaria and edited by me. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you. That was fun.
It was so fun. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.